Okay, hello everyone. I'm just here to do my presentation, and I'm really sorry that I cannot do it in person because to be honest, not really feeling really good. And my presentation is on the critical perspective on modernization theory of development. So I have chosen modernization as my model of development, and I'm kind of like critiquing it, not really advocating for the approach. Okay. So before we start the critique, I think it's really important that we understand the origins of the modernization development and what it is all about. So the thought they kind of began in the following the Great Depression and the World War II Reconstruction period, where kind of like the whole Europe was basically kind of ruined, and the United States they extended they offered foreign aid for the reconstruction of the European countries, and as a result they offered the development paradigms as well. So one of the most famous kind of development projects was Truman's Point Four program, which was aimed at kind of exporting all the United States institutions and all the their social and scientific experience into the what's so-called underdeveloped areas. So, however, there is an argument, as you can see, probably very clear that those exported development paradigms are not just trying to make somewhere better off what most of them claim to be. However, a lot of the scholars they claim that it is actually a geopolitical tool. The one of the most famous is probably in their narratives. So as the Wozniak has suggested, so that was not the analyst, but that was like the narrative itself. So it's a very good tool for the counter or the trying to stop the spread of the opposite team, which was the communism spreading from the Soviet Union to the rest of the world. So United States kind of used the development paradigms, the modernization paradigms, as a tool, kind of like to counter the spread of communism in other parts of the world. And it's also similar when Rostow, who's very famous, you might, I think I've seen him in the A-level geography textbooks, famous for his development stage. But he also kind of suggested that the communism is a virus that's rapidly spreading, so he has to promote an alternative to communism to offer to the countries rest in the rest of the world to adapt their paradigm of development as an alternative to communism. So this was particularly important in the post-World War II period, where following the collapse of the colonialism and the empires led to a lot of emergence of a lot of independent states. So so during the Cold War, the United and the Russia, sorry, not Russia, the Soviet Union, they had a kind of like an ideology battleground on which side the countries they choose themselves to lean towards. Yeah, so just as we've discussed earlier, so modernization is not just a ideology that's unique to the United States or like a Western ideology. The Soviet Union also had their own kind of modernization paradigms, and one of the main difference is that the Soviet model they believed in the state-led industrialization, an alternative to the capital-led or the free market dominating modernization that's promoted by the United States. So the point is that both of the parties they had their own modernization ideals. So it was not only the United States who pushed for it, but rather they were kind of like combating combating each other. So it's actually a battleground of ideology of modernization. So this is why scholars have in the recent years they have promoted a study of the global history of development rather than just focusing on it solely on the Western side of the story. So summarizing what the development, the modernization is all about, Power, he has put it roughly into four main points. Although it's really, of course, it's really difficult to provide a whole coverage of, because it's a lot of institutions, a lot of policies has played a part in the development paradigms, but there are just four main points of the modernization thinking. So Well, first, the key aspect is the evolutionary stage. So, as you've probably seen in Rustow's development stage, so it assumes that society would progress through fixed stages of development. And well, many of the stages, when you're looking at the United model, like the Rustow's model, it's like the industrialized Western countries, their experience in those stages. And next is as societies, as they modernize, as they gradually develop, they would develop more and new, more complex institutions, like more governmental institutions or educational institutions. So they kind of have to integrate new social structures to maintain the stability of their social of their society. So it's like moving away from the what so called the undeveloped social structures, but you're integrating what so called modern social institutions into the society. And next is the path that the countries would take. So it assumes that the countries would take the same path as the Western countries have did in the past. So it assumes that the development trajectories would be linear. So there will be no alternative path. So most countries would or should take the stages that the Western countries had taken. And lastly, it assumes a lot of technological change, which also and also cultural changes. So people have to abandon their old traditions and or actually the traditions they are thought of or seen as the barrier of development. So you have to give them up. You have to embrace the Western technology, Western science, in order for a better off living, as claimed by by Truman in his one of his many of his projects, and also the Soviet Union as well. Okay, so this is just how it could how the 4 points they are kind of like visualized in Rustow's development model. So first of all, you can see there it is a very linear trajectory, and secondly, it goes off in stages. And most importantly of all is that all of the trajectory and stages is based on the past experience. Well, in this model is based on the past experience of United States, but probably Soviet Union they have their own model as well. Well, yeah, so now, I guess we're quite familiar with the characteristics of modernization as a development trajectory, and so next I will be offering some criticisms towards modernization. So first of all, I just wanted to show you this quote. So it's from Rustow himself. So it says he stated that there is sense in which rapid economic progress is impossible without painful adjustments, and the ancient philosophies must have to be scrapped, and all social institutions have to disintegrate, and kind of have like everything people they have to give up. They have to, as he calls the pain, they have to endure the pain for the modern development. And looking back at this quote, about 70 years after, I think we can all agree that it's very ignorant. So it's very arrogant. He believes that this way is the only safe to the humanity, or the only goal of any society in whatever place of the world. And he strongly diminishes the cultural uniqueness and the value basically of all the past traditions of other communities in different places of the world. And he's no matter like he overlooks all the complexities and just says that, oh, you need to give them up no matter where you're from in order to have a better living. Yeah, so this quote, looking back from now, it reviews one of the major flaw in the modernization theory, which is that it assumes that development must come at a cost of traditional values and institutions, and also embrace the Western traditions. So the first point of criticism that we can see is that, so once if we break down this point, this quote basically what it resembles into different main points. The first point that we can see is that it is very Western centric, and also follows a lot of the Cold War ideology. So I guess we've explained pretty much why it is very Western centric, because all the stages are based in Western histories, and it rejects to acknowledge the value and the point of all the other societies around the world. But I also want to argue that the modernization itself is although it claims to be a or a help or an international aid to other societies, but um, if you have an examination in a geopolitical perspective, you realize that it's also a Cold War tool. So the theories, the two modernization or the global modernization, they were theories promoted by different major powers like the United States or Soviet Union to strengthen their ideology or to exert their ideology onto different parts of the world. So I guess from this point of view, you can't say that it's very neutral. It's of course it is very biased, whatever modernization it is, and as a result, I think it is not necessarily beneficial, but rather it's being utilized as an exertion of power rather than a genuine support paradigm to other places of the world. And nextly, I would like to suggest some of the implications of modernization. So it, of course, it did not offer not necessarily offer the economic prosperity and life prosperity generally, as it has promised to the countries that has been adapting its ideals. So as you can see, a lot of so first of all, it has the trickle down effects. Although theoretically it sounds nice and is very promising, but a lot of time it didn't really work. So it didn't really materialize. In other words, so it actually led to a lot of rural urban, for example, it led to a lot of rural urban inequalities and a lot of places who were not integrated into for example, the United States dominated paradigms or the Soviet dominated paradigms were left behind. And secondly, I think one of the most major challenge to the implications is the dependency theory. So so it suggests that modernization has, although it promises economic prosperity, but in reality, it had locked a lot of countries who had adopted the method into a dependence on foreign aid and multinational corporations, right? So, for example, the core and peripheral region. So, if you chose to follow into the modernization, you're either kind of like locked into the Soviet or the United States. So you have no choice, but you have to align yourself within one of the powers, and you have to, and by doing that, you place yourself on the lower part of the hierarchy of the entire system that was built by that major power, either the U.S. or Soviets. And also, it also the colonial history also adds a bit more complexity to that, because a lot of the countries they were left in a exploitative economic structures. So, for example, a lot of the former colonies, right? They still the empire, they still had a large empire. Large influence by the former empires states that used to dominate them, and that as a result, it kind of the colonial history adds a layer of complexity into this core and periphery model. And lastly, I would like to suggest that this modernization theory is also a huge oversimplification of social and cultural complexities. So first of all, building on from the ideas of Orientalism mentioned by Edward Said. So the countries that kind of projects the modernization development ideals to other places of the world, they draw a simple binary distinction. If you follow the modernization, then you're simply developing, or you're simply on the right path with quotation marks. And if you didn't, you're just traditional and your lack of development. So in other words, you're bad. So this was very a general oversimplification. Also, as we've discussed earlier, so it fails to address the cultural complexities of a lot of places of the world. They just simply regard them as lack of development. They're as barbaric, in other words, in what Edward Said would mention in Orientalism. And also, another layer of the critique is in the gender issues, because modernization itself, the theory itself, they kind of just completely overlook all the other aspects of social development than economics. So it kind of just prioritized the economic gains and economic prosperity as the foundation, but it kind of overlooked all, like for example, the development of gender equality, for example, right? So, and also a lot of the modernization, when the theory was built, it was in the 1950s, 1960s, and actually a lot of the the paradigms, it was a very masculine dominated. So, for example, they would prioritize male and related industries like manufacturing and uh, industries which kind of they overlooked, for example, the importance of females in economic activities and production. So it's also to do with its as we call the situated knowledge, because it's based on that kind of time and context. So it overlooks a lot of the gender complexibilities. And so overall, based on all the criticisms, I would suggest, like personally, I would suggest that development is not a one size fit all process. So it's definitely not like one project would overcome all the projects and all the all the difficulties. And as a result, I believe that sustainable progress, in order for any development to be sustainable and beneficial, it must respect the history, culture, and as well as the agency of the local communities. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm really sorry that I have to record this, but yeah, thank you so much.